Well, you asked us to describe the geopolitical environment, and I think the tectonic plates shift underneath our feet on what feels like an almost daily basis. But it's very clear that what's emerging are three large blocks. We have North America, we have Europe, and we have China. And we all know that trade declines with distance. So geographically, we are in the UK closest to the largest single market in the EU. It is our most important trading partner, and the growth on offer for the UK. And let's not forget that the government's stated number one ambition is to get growth and to have sustained growth and fast growth within the G7. And the trade improvements that could be negotiated during any kind of review of the Trade and Cooperation Agreement, according to Best of Britain's work published, undertaken by Frontier Economics, but published by us, showed that there is up to 2.2% GDP growth available if there is deep alignment on goods and services with the EU.
I wondered, Naomi Smith, does the government have an overall strategic vision for this reset? And we've heard a little bit of a suggestion of some of the things the government might be interested in, but I mean, what do you think of their shopping list? And could it be longer and could it be more ambitious?
It certainly could be more ambitious, and I think it should be if they're concerned about what the public is looking for. So at Best of Britain, we did a poll with YouGov of 5,000 voters very recently, and trade is voters' top priority at the upcoming EU-UK summit, above defence and tackling migration. The public is looking for progress on trade. You asked, do I know what the government's strategic vision is? We know what their red lines are. We know that is a firmly held view, and that they believe that the mandate that they were given at the 2024 general election was based on those red lines. And so at Best of Britain, the work that we've done in terms of producing policy recommendations through the UK Trade and Business Commission that we run is within those red lines. And there is a huge amount that can be done. And the growth figures I talked about earlier, up to 1.5% GDP growth if there is deep goods alignment with the EU, and up to 2.2% GDP growth if there is deep goods and services alignment. The detail of how you do that deep alignment is within the government's stated red lines. Now, the problem with not having been very explicit about what their strategic vision is, and I understand that they don't want to give a running commentary on live negotiations, is that it leaves the rest of us to speculate as to what their vision might be. So when we talk about the thousands of times all of the new Brexit red tape can go around the world, from the UK traders that are desperately filling out double the amount of paperwork, it is exactly that. So if you want to produce a product that is qualified to be sold into the single market, it has to be produced to those standards, and it has to be certified as such with a CE marking. In the UK, we now have the UKCA marking. So what this has effectively done is it's either had a depressing effect on trade, and exporters have decided to no longer sell into the single market because the margin is not there once you add on the extra cost and time of duplicating that conformity assessment, or they are spending the money and the time to do both in order to still sell in both jurisdictions. So mutual recognition of conformity assessment sounds very dull, actually extremely important. And with the UK Trade and Business Commission, we've taken evidence from thousands of SMEs across the country, every corner of the UK, every sector of the economy. And without question, the thing that comes up from all of them is we need to get rid of that red tape. And it's not good enough to just have the deal on agri-food. We need it for all goods if we're to remove those trade barriers at the border. So we at Best of Britain call it beneficial alignment, so aligning when it is beneficial to do so. And one of the policy recommendations of the UK Trade and Business Commission was also to set up a new UK-EU Cooperation Council that could oversee alignment and divergence where it needed to happen or was in the interests of either side for that to happen. And I think that remains a good idea. And it doesn't involve freedom of movement. So it's not a return to that. That would come with single market access. So it's very much about removing as many of the trading barriers and that friction at the border that the SMEs particularly are struggling with. But, large companies are as well. They might have the balance sheet strength to absorb that shock, but it is eroding margins and having an impact on forward pricing for consumers. So beneficial alignment is about removing as many of those trade barriers as possible, but without being a member of the single market.
The government is keen to remove barriers and make it easier for business to trade with Europe, but at the same time wants to achieve Donald Trump's beautiful trade agreement, which is on offer to the UK. To what extent are those compatible as two objectives?
Trade is about trade-offs, and when we hear about anything the US has ever said, now, previously under previous administrations there and here, it is very clear that they do want to be able to sell their agricultural products into the UK, and we often hear about chlorinated chicken and hormone beef as the two that are most often cited, and that is that trade-off. I think if we sort of talk about sovereignty and trading sovereignty for growth in the other direction, you're trading the deal with the US in order to accept the products that very, very few consumers in the UK would find palatable and want, and certainly our farmers who have already been facing the impact of the New Zealand and Australia trade deals, which negatively impacted them. And I'm sure you will have heard evidence from them yourselves. We certainly have through the UK Trade and Business Commission that would make them even less competitive. And then that's before you talk about the impact on consumers. Those cheaper, lower quality products flooding our supermarkets would then, of course, be more likely to be consumed by people on lower incomes than those of us sat in this room who would probably still opt for the organic homegrown produce. I think the real risk for the UK is bobbing around mid-Atlantic tethered to precisely no one while they're doing bilateral agreements or tariff wars with one another. And where does that leave us? And, Professor Paton touched on it as well. I think you said, who knows what America will do and where it will end up on all of this. And that's exactly also my opening point, reliability. And I just think in terms of where we need to focus energy in our government at the moment, it needs to be where we can get a deal that is relied upon rather than with a regime at the moment that, tariffs 1 minute, 90-day freeze the next. We don't know come Christmas what will have tariffs, what won't, which products they will apply to, how much those tariffs will be. And so I do think the strategic imperative for our government is to prioritise. It's not about choice, it's not about choosing between, but prioritising the EU, because as Anand points out, we'll either risk not getting anything with the US because they're concerned about the SPS stuff we're doing with Europe. Europe may not give us the SPS stuff because they're worried about what an AI deal or a gene editing divergence might mean in terms of our relationship with the US. And that is the real risk. No growth whatsoever because we are stuck with the status quo.
A question for Naomi Smith. What does the polling say on youth mobility?
In every single constituency, even in Clacton, it's popular. So 66% want a youth mobility scheme of 2 years, 50% 4 years. So you still have a majority of people in the UK supporting it for as long as 4 years, which I don't think is being discussed at the moment. I think it's looking like it might be 1 or 2 years, maybe with a 1 year extension at most. So it is extremely popular with all kinds of voters in every part of the country. And yes, Professor Menon is right. The EU will want this as part of a negotiation, and we've talked previously about our relative size to the US and the EU, and the fact of the matter is we don't have a huge amount to negotiate with, and a youth visa scheme is one of them. It is one of the things alongside everything that we can offer on defence and security that they are bringing as their asks of the research. So it is very, very important, and it's incredibly important for young British people as well. I would just add that I think it would be very damaging for the government. We know that 43% to 14, so 3 times the number, expect the government to be pursuing a deeper relationship with Europe rather than with the US, and that's from our YouGov March poll of 2,000 people. And our YouGov poll in April of 5,000 people showed that the majority of people think the government is not going far enough. Only 15% think that the government is going too far in the reset, and about 15% about right. So I think if they come away more or less empty-handed, bar for the Security and Defence Pact, that would be perceived poorly by voters of government. And you're right, the economic value of the fishing industry is one thing, but the contribution to the communities where they are based is enormous. And the fishing industry has been appallingly let down. And, the catastrophic decimation, frankly, of that industry is not to be undermined at all. And if there's one thing we've heard again and again and again as we've been taking evidence as best written at the UK Trade and Business Commission from the fishing sector, it's that we could have all the access to all of the fishing waters in all the world. If we can't get the fish to market, if we don't remove the trade barrier to sell it, it's pointless. So again, they are very supportive of removing those trade barriers and getting the alignment to help them actually sell a Dalgety Bay prawn that needs to get onto a restaurant table in Paris by lunchtime. And if it gets held up at the border, forget it, you've lost the lot.
What would you all consider to be the minimum set of outcomes from the 19th of May summit that you would deem a successful reset? I know we've differed on the 10 reset, but what would you say is a success? If you could summarise in sort of maybe 3 bullets.
Probably just go with 2. One, the Security and Defence Pact, or whatever it's going to be called, is clearly urgent and of most significant importance. And then whether it's called a political declaration, a strategic partnership, a framework for future negotiations, whatever political title it gets given, a timelined framework for negotiations on all of the things that we know will remove that friction at the trade border, like mutual recognition of professional qualifications, of conformity assessment, the issues around touring artists, and then also whether this youth visa scheme can and will happen, and what flavour it will take, how long, what age limits, and when it can come into force. I think if we get that from the overarching ambition for the TCA reset into 2026, that would be great.